Hello everyone, this is Meg at Chasing Retro. I come to you today with the flip throughs of the 3 Bedtime Nighty Night themed junk journals that I just finished yesterday. They will be in my shop tomorrow night, which will be January 13th, Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you would like to go ahead and reserve one or purchase one ahead of time, you may do that by emailing me at chasingretro78@gmail.com, and you can let me know there if you would prefer to go ahead and purchase it with a PayPal invoice, or if you would like me to list it in my shop under your initials as a reserved listing. All right, we will start with the smallest one. They all have the same number of pages pretty much. When I say smaller, I mean, number of inches smaller. This one is named Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And it is made out of a Whitman's Telltale book, a vintage Whitman's Telltale book. And it has, I didn't do anything to the cover, back or front. I did decide to go ahead and put some eyelets in here so that I could tie some crinkled seam binding. I have crinkled seam binding on all of them. They are all vintage seam binding. The last one, the green one, did not crinkle like the others because it's a different type. You'll see that in a minute, but it still turned out very, very pretty. And I pulled it through doubly so it would have a double bow. This has vintage calico on the edge. This is one of my favorite fabrics in my stash, and I don't have much of it left. And they all have a removable tassel with a variety of ribbons, lace, and yarn that match the cover. Nothing super over the top, just a little fun tassel for visual effect. And they all will have a vintage yo-yo with a button hand sewn onto it that is put either in this corner or this corner. This one has a navy blue seam binding, and it has a charm dangle with some turquoise and light blue beads. This one measures 6 1/4 inches tall, 5 3/8 inches wide, so it's almost a square. And they all have a 1.5 inch spine that's been reinforced with Tyvek. This one has 24 folded pages, 12 in each signature. So that's 48 leaflets or 96 back and fronts. I decided not to put a pocket on the inside front cover because I could not cover up this beautiful image here. So I left that as it is, but I put a double pocket here, and I did a little cluster using a quote that I typed on my typewriter and a piece of vintage sheet behind it. These all have numerous pieces of vintage sheets, obviously, because they're bedtime journals. I have 2 little digitals here that you can journal on the back of or use to decorate something in the journal. And then I have every image pretty much that I found out of vintage children's books of children sleeping, having PJs on, getting ready for bed, saying their prayers, things like that. And then I put this one down on this beautiful digital of a vintage sheet by Molly's Mantel on Etsy. I will link her shop. Please go check it out. She has some awesome vintage sheet digitals for printing. And then I did another typewriter here, and this is from a story, and I just cut that quote out. There are a lot of also vintage pattern people, mainly children. I had some adults wearing pajamas, but I saved those for another, maybe for my slumber party, because they looked kind of like teenagers. So most of the people in these journals are going to be children, because that's what I wanted to focus on, was putting children to bed and, making them slow down and get in the bed and recharged for the next day, and all of that entails the little routines that we have, saying your prayers, reading a story, brushing your teeth, all of that. I tried to encompass all of that. So there's journaling space on the back of those too. Here is a side pocket with a little alarm clock digital. And then this beautiful image of this little baby sleeping with, it looks like a little stuffed pig, stuffed animal. And then this is from a cover of a book, a paperback book of Robert Louis Stevenson poems. And I cut the little images apart and used them as embellishments on journaling cards in all 3 journals. This is a page from, obviously, from Goodnight Moon. This is a poem page from a library book that I found at a discard sale. Some striped paper and eyelet, and that's where the dangle is attached. Here is one of my vintage pattern, some of them are from pattern books, and some of them are from vintage patterns that were so tattered and torn that the only way I could save them was to cut the little images out. This is a piece of vintage stationery from the 60s with delicate little daisies on it. This is from a Work Basket magazine. It's one of those, I don't know if it's an iron-on transfer, but it's just a pattern for stitching maybe. I'm not really sure. This is a piece of vintage wallpaper. I love this pattern. And on the back, in all the journals, I tried to create, using a vintage sheet and some satin ribbon, I tried to create the effect of a sheet with the, you know, the wool blankets with the satin edging. I wanted to create that look. So each one of the journals has that. So it's kind of like, you could even put one of the little, get a little cutout character and pretend like you're tucking them into bed. This is not a pattern book image, but it is from a vintage McCall's magazine from the late 50s. And it was, I don't know if you remember in the back of the McCall's magazines, they would have like a little section about sewing and ads for simplicity patterns that you could buy. And this was one of them. And I put some pink frosted eyelash trim here. And all of them will have a tea bag of Calm Chamomile by Tazo Tea. This is from a children's book from the 80s called Ira Sleeps Over. I'm sure you guys remember that. I think it was a Reading Rainbow book. So if you watch that show. This is a piece of dyed paper in a beautiful turquoise. Here is a prayer song with evening. It's a children's book, is what I'm trying to say. Children's song book, and it had a couple of hymns about evening. Here's a little digital of a glass of water, and I put a quote, just one more glass of water. They all have that in the journals. Vintage rickrack. In the center is a piece of black cardboard, or cardstock rather. It's like a very lightweight cardstock. And I put some vintage star seals on one side here. You can journal on the black paper, or you can put photographs down, or you can glue images down. If you journal with this, you'll need to use a white pen or a metallic pen or a chalk pen. Any of those will work. Here's another image from a sewing pattern. Pink graph paper. Paper clipped here is a little digital of Norman Rockwell painting. And this is a little girl sleeping, and I used Wink of Stella to make her pillow sparkle. I don't think I did this on all of them. I think I made the little girl's shirt sparkle in all of them, but not the pillow. And then this is another one of those sheet digitals from Molly's Mantel. This is a tip-in, I guess you would call it. This is another children's songbook image, and it tips out for more journaling space. Here is an image from a vintage children's book, and I turned it into a tuck spot, sort of. I glued this side down so it's more like an open pocket. And then it has a shaker card with some celestial background and then some star glitter. Another page from that poem book. Clipped here, we have a fabric topped tag of a little girl sleeping. And then this is from a childcraft book. And I put him on some cardstock for journaling. This is a digital image that I put onto a circle punch and used a star brad so you can roll this down. And it holds these items in here. Another sewing pattern kit and some fun, I just recently got this in a grab bag, some fun ribbon. And here's another image of a little kid maybe wishing on a star. This I thought was really fun. This is a paper pad that I recently got from, oh my goodness, I've forgotten the brand name. It's a 8x6 paper pad. But anyway, it looked like holographic quilt hexagons. And then I put this vintage pink velvety trim. And this is, I think this is Diddle Diddle Dumpling My Son John. It was out of a poetry book. So I put him there. And then here is a little tiny envelope made of wallpaper. And inside here we have a little tiny journaling card. And then we have this beautiful image of a child praying and a journaling card that says dream. A little belly band with some paper lace and this adorable little bunny tucked into bed on this green journaling card. This is an Eloise Wilkins image. He's crawling into his crib. This is a mother bird putting her baby birds to bed. This is a vintage sheet of typewriter paper. You can see the little watermark maybe. A vintage sheet tab on this pattern page for pajamas. This is children's nightgown pattern. This is blanket binding, vintage blanket binding in a peach, and I just sewed it to the edge of the page. This is a really fun book that I got at a library book sale of what everything looked like in this child's room and hometown in the dark. And so everything has these muted tones. This is from a Humpty Dumpty magazine. And this is Kool-Aid dyed notebook paper. This is from another book about children and animals going to sleep. I used a page from it, and it has a yellow ruffle on the side. A ledger page. Here I put some vintage Tyrolean type trim that looks like something you put on a nightgown. And then I have this adorable Eloise Wilkins, I believe, image. And then a little notepad sheet. This I clipped out of a book called Sandman Tales. And I was going to use the cover for it for one of the journals, but I just didn't love the cover. But it is really old. You can tell by how dark the paper is. I got this at a flea market, and I want to say it was from like 1919. It was very old and very brittle, so I glued it down just to preserve it. Another sewing pattern, I think she's from a catalog. And then I wrote, feeling cozy. This is from Sesame Street. And so Barkley is asleep on the doorstep and everyone's going to bed. Here's some yellow vintage rickrack on this handwriting page. Another little sewing pattern girl. I backed her onto cardstock and then glued her onto this corner pocket and put Sweet Dreams. And then this is a vintage index card that I folded a piece of vintage sheet over. And this is a poem from A.A. Milne about the dark, and put some vintage fabric that matches the cover. This is from a health book from the 60s. I love this poem. It's about trying to procrastinate bedtime. And here's a little kid, and he has snuck a flashlight into his room so when his mom leaves, he can read. And here is another piece of vintage sheet that I ruffled up. A Dennis the Menace comic. Babysitter's gonna try to put this kid to bed. I love how he says, try to put me to bed. Vintage sheet tab. Here's a fabric flip. This is some, I believe I got this from Carrie the Paper Monkey. She sent me a lot of flannel, which I didn't have any of, but it's perfect for a bedtime journal. And then some more cover fabric and some more of that daisy sheet. Here's a quote. Oops. Look at those adorable little faces. Typing paper, side pocket. Here's that image again with the little child in the cradle. This is from a Golden Wonder Why book, and it was about telling time or something about having a watch and the sun going down and the moon coming up. And this is a snippet from a poem about twins. So this one is called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. When the ribbon is all crinkly like this, it's hard to keep track of where it is when you tie the bow. Okay. The next one is named Nighty Night. And it is made out of a, let me raise this up just a little. It is made out of a vintage, I don't remember. It's not a Whitman's. It might be a Rand McNally, but it is a Wonder Book. That's what it is. Wonder Book. I left the back as it is, including the vintage age tape. I found this at an estate sale probably 3 years ago. It was a very loved book. The entire book was held together with tape. Lots and lots of Scotch tape, so you can see the remnants of it. I put a yo-yo here with a button and some rickrack. It has a tassel with colors that match what's on the cover. And I put red crinkled seam binding on here. This one has a bead dangle of wooden beads. This one measures 8 1/8 tall, 6 1/4 wide. It has 1.5 inch spine. It also has 24 folded pages, 12 in each signature. So that's 48 leaflets or 96 back and fronts. This is a Bobbsey Twins book that evidently is quite rare. I've had people comment that they had never seen this one before. And the book was about Freddie's birthday. So he was getting out of bed and he spent the whole day doing things that he liked to do. So because of that, there were no images other than this one of him in the bed. So I decided to make it a bedtime journal instead. So I did not use the original pages because none of the pages were about going to bed. But still, nonetheless, I put fun pages in here from other books and created a bedtime theme. The inside was quite, I'm trying to remember what the inside cover looked like. I think it was just all scribbled on. So I decided to cover it with this beautiful corally red star paper, and then I made a double pocket here with more stars, and here's a star brad and a quote from Lemony Snicket. And then tucked in here we have an Eloise Wilkins image on a tag with this pink lace. This beautiful image is from a book about mothers, and I put it onto this pink paper. And then another piece of that poem about the twins. Here is another image from a children's book that I turned into a tuck spot. And then we have one of the sewing pattern images. I could not get that price tag off, but I thought that was kind of cool that it's still on there. And then this looks like the sort of a picote trim that you would put on a pajama set. I have some of that trim in my stash. And then here is a vintage sheet on a vintage index card. This is another one of Molly's Mantel digital sheet prints. And then here's an image of a little boy being put to bed by his mother and a quote. I don't know this quote is from this story, but it is a quote about, you know, the little boy wished that he could stay up longer, and she told him that if he closes his eyes, then that tomorrow will come faster. That's what they tried to tell us anyway, right? This is a poem from Ideals magazine called Tucking the Babies In. The backside did not have anything bedtime themed, so I sort of turned it into a pocket page. This is from another storybook, and I put a quote that I found about dreaming. And here is a large journaling card with some star glitter. Here's a quote from Peter Pan. Teddy bears. This is a Robert Louis Stevenson poem book. And then here is some vintage light blue fringe trim. Here is the glass of water and the little quote. This is from, it's two poems. One's called Windy Nights, and this one is, the poem's not here, but the picture is a little boy watching the lamplighter light the lanterns at night. Can you imagine having to, like, living in a time where someone had to go do that every night when the sun set? And then here's some vintage wallpaper, a side tuck with this really fun hexagon cardstock. This is a very old, not very old, probably late 60s Sealy Posturepedic mattress ad. And I put this here because it looked kind of like ticking. And then I have this Eloise Wilkins image, this little, I think it was called Patience. So the man's best friend or the boy's best friend is waiting patiently for him to wake up so he can play with him again. This is a page out of a book about quilts that I got from Carrie the Paper Monkey. Thank you, Carrie, for this. I am using every page of this and loving every minute of it. Here's a little chevron bag, and I put a piece of flannel with another quote. These quotes made me laugh. And here is the image from a Norman Rockwell painting, and then a tea bag. Vintage blue rickrack on blue graph. I punched the edge of this blue cardstock, and then here I made this little journaling card. This is not from, I don't think this is from Molly's Mantel. I don't remember where I got this image from, but it's like a fabric. It is a fabric. It may not be a sheet, but this is from a book about poems, and there was a poem about a baby in golden slumber with the sun setting. And this is a poem called My Bed is a Boat. And I don't have the poem in here, but I have the illustration. So I made that the center signature. This is some really fun fabric that I think I got from Cindy. If I'm mistaken, I've got the wrong person, I'm so sorry. But whoever sent this to me, thank you. I think it was intended for my slumber party journal, but I wanted to use a piece of it in here. And then a little piece of flannel and some giant rickrack. So you can journal under here. And I put some vintage blue star labels, I guess they're called, seals. A little piece of ruffle that I used with a strip of fabric, and then the wooden bead. This is from a vintage children's book. It's very psychedelic looking. I love it. And then in here we have a little digital and bushel on a peck journaling card. An adorable little sewing pattern girl. Those little footed PJs, man. I think they're so cute, but I remember how uncomfortable they were. They were itchy. Pajama party for one, please. Here is a double pocket, and I put a dictionary definition of night. And then two little journaling cards here. And another page made into a card out of that poetry book. And this is not Eloise Wilkins. I don't remember where this came from, but it's a little child praying. I think it was a children's song book. Lullaby poem. This was a poem that was not about nighttime, so I put a piece of scrapbook paper down, and then I cut her out of a Humpty Dumpty magazine and glued her down. And here's the other half of tucking the babies in. Paper clipped to this, we have another piece of that twins poem or daily nighttime. It's from a 365 bedtime stories book, and I just thought it was so cute. And a sleeping baby. My hands are cold, so I'm having trouble holding on to things. Here's a corner pocket with that Tyrolean trim, and then a little note sheet, and I glued this little guy from a children's book down. And this is from a vintage sewing pattern. Very 80s. I love it. Big sis, little sis, maybe. And this paper right here, don't remember the name of the collection, but it's sort of a retro sewing collection. Or maybe it's not sewing, but it's just a retro collection, but it looked like a quilt. So, and here's a vintage sheet with the satin trim, like I did in the other one. And then we have this vintage sewing pattern girl, and I layered it with a journaling card on top of a vintage sheet digital from Molly's Mantel. Adorable praying picture with a little bear. And I thought this fabric looked like pajamas, like boys' pajamas. Here is a little image from a children's book that's just a little paper pocket. And then, of course, I have to put family circle in my journals if I can. I'll put a little sheet ruffle on the top. This is from Dick and Jane. And then another sewing pattern image of a little boy with this little toy dog. This is Kool-Aid dyed paper. This is from, I believe, the 365 story. It may not be, but it is the flyleaf page of a storybook collection. And all the animals are going to bed. Here's a belly band with a digital of an alarm clock and a poem about bed at night, in bed at night. Handwriting paper. A quote from Walt Disney. Beautiful dyed dark turquoise paper. A little fabric flip here with some vintage trim and a paper daisy. Oh, here's the poem, My Bed is a Boat. I did put it in here, didn't I? And there's another one on the back. Here is the peach seam binding, blanket binding rather, on a ledger page. Instructions for Girls' Pajamas by Simplicity. This is vintage stationery. I received this from Feed the Birdies Etsy shop. I will try my best to remember to link everyone, but this is from Feed the Birdies. And then this is another quote. A fabric tab. More poems. This is from a library discard book. And I made this the center spread because I could not bear to break this image up. Here's a vintage sheet that I ruffled with my sewing machine. Oh, I meant to mention, all the thread in these, I used a mint green, a light lavender, and a light blue. So I was trying to go with the sleepy time colors. This is a Molly's Mantel digital, and then I put the sewing pattern girl on front. And this is an adorable picture of a dad reading to his son, I guess right after he got home from work. Still has his suit on. Little paper daisy here on the back of the stationery. This page was ripped, so I put a piece of my faux aged acetate tape here. Very tiny vintage rickrack. Another ruffle. Clipped here, we have the little girl, and I did use Wink of Stella on her shirt or her pajamas. And this is from a book I recently received in Happy Mail from Maureen. Thank you, Maureen. It was this adorable little 80s looking book about a mouse. And there were a couple of images in there about bedtime. So here's another sewing pattern kid. His foot was cut off, so I put the little quote on top of it, Team No Sleep, because he looks like he's making a plan not to go to bed tonight. This is a adorable image of a brother and sister, and then it flips up for hidden journaling space. The other half of that flyleaf page, they're all reading a book before bed. Look at that. And then this is from a sewing pattern. So this, you know, sometimes when you get in the bed and move your feet and cats think that you're playing, I love that. Love that image. This is a tuck spot made out of a book image, and I wanted to just include another couple of poems, so you can do with this what you would like to. And then this is an image from an old Bobbsey Twins book, one of the chapter books, so I thought I should put it in this journal. This is Bert and one of his friends. It's not Freddie, I think it's a friend. And they were on a beach vacation. So that was Nighty Night with the Bobbsey Twins book. And I have one more to show you guys. This next one is it has the same number of pages, but it has, of all three of them, the most pockets and the most ephemera, just because of the size of the journal it is, and because I had to fold papers in a certain way to fit the length of the book that it ended up creating more pockets. So I filled those pockets. So this one is named Moonbeams, but obviously it's a Goodnight Moon book. So first thing first, I have a wooden G that I painted yellow. If you would like me to add that to this, I can. I will either glue it down or I'll just include it, and you can decide if you want to glue it down. But if you don't really want it, you don't have to take it. Let me go find it. I thought I had it over here, but I do not. So I painted this. It is similar to the same font. It's the sans serif font, but it's a little bit bigger. So I thought maybe I would glue it here, but then I was like, maybe the person who wants it doesn't want it there. So I will leave that completely up to the buyer. So let me know when you purchase it if you want this G, yes or no. And if you do want it, do you want me to go ahead and attach it? So I'm excited that I was able to create a journal out of this book, because I've been wanting to for a very long time, and it gives me hope that I can create journals in this size, because I have a couple of other books, such as The Little House and Corduroy, that are also this, landscape sort of shape and size. So I'm very excited that I figured out a way to do it. It's not my favorite type of journal to make, because it does involve a lot more folding, sewing, gluing, thinking outside the box to figure out how to make some of the pages extend out enough. But nevertheless, I'm proud with the results. I'm excited about them. This one has a very primary colored tassel with a lot of different ribbons and trim. Here's some very small orange yarn that I recently got at a thrift shop. I put some gingham in here just because this journal just felt so 80s when I got done with it. So I wanted to put a lot of the 80s type ribbons that you would have seen in children's hair bows and stuff. And then I have a yo-yo with a red button sewn on, and vintage green calico from the 80s, and then rickrack, and the back is as it was. This is also seam binding, and I did crinkle it, believe it or not, just like the other two. But because it's the seam binding with the I don't know that it's a stretch or what, but it has these little lines. It did not, this is all it crinkled. So it just gave it a little more fluff, I guess, but it didn't fully crinkle it, but I still think it looks really, really pretty, so I'm gonna leave it. So this one is called Moonbeams. It's 7 inches tall, 8 inches wide, 1.5 inch spine again. This one has 1 page less, so it has 23 folded pages, 11 in the first, 12 in the second. So that's 46 leaflets or 92 back and fronts. However, like I said, this one has more ephemera in it and more pockets because of the way that it's made. All right, so let's see what the inside is like. I hope I can fit it all. I'll try to remember to move it back and forth. This is another book that I decided to put some papers down. This one actually had just a plain yellow cover, inside cover, and it was very scuffed, very old. It actually looked very just dingy, and I didn't like it. So I put the star paper down. I made a double pocket and a quote from J.K. Rowling with a little star Brad. And here's that little girl again with the wink of Stella shiny pajamas. This little guy came back again. This is from a Childcraft book. And this is from a very old vintage sewing pattern from the 40s. And I put this on top. On this side, we have a tuck spot with this. This is from, I want to say the Child's Bookshelf Library. A little girl saying her prayers. And then we have this Eloise Wilkins boy. And then we have this poem called Who Nibbles the Moon? Seam binding on the top of that. Here's one of those pages that I was telling you with the built-in pocket because of the way I sewed it. So these are very deep, very wide pockets, and you can probably stuff a lot of things into these if you get this journal. This is an adorable little card, the quilt I love, and I put it on some blue cardstock. Here's the One More Glass of Water and vintage blue rickrack. I did put a few pages from the original book in here, but not all of them because some of them were very badly water damaged, so I left those out. And then a dyed piece of turquoise. This is a children's, I want to say it's from the 40s, a children's music instruction book. And it was about a little boy going to bed, and I made it into a pocket. Here's little twin brothers again. And then I put the poem about them on the back. I didn't want to lose that. Starlight, Starbright. I put her, she's from a sewing pattern. And then this adorable little image of a mouse tucked all into bed at night. Here is some rickrack, green and yellow. And then I put the vintage star seals on that page. This is the book about what your room looks like at night. This is 80s border. I've had this in my stash for a while, and though it is not nighttime, it would go in a child's bedroom, and it fit the perfect colors for this journal. So I made it into a large pocket, and then I put this little note sheet in here with a little window of nighttime with rain. These pages fold out, and then I put some vintage yarn here. Here's the little pocket that looks like a bed with the satin trim. And here is the shaker card with the star glitter. On this pocket, I sewed down some squares of vintage fabrics. I love this one that is so 80s. My family and I were trying to figure out what these were. We finally determined that we think they're boats. And then this is another image from the book from Maureen with the little mouse, and she's getting ready to go to bed. She's washing her hair. Here's an Eloise Wilkins page. And this is the center. It's actually the other side of the Eloise Wilkins, and then I used a paper hinge, I think. Was it paper hinge? Yes, paper hinge to attach this prayer, nighttime prayer, and 2 more songs, and then a little blue ruffle. And this is from a vintage sheet. Here is a poem called The Land of Nod. Here's another Goodnight Moon page. The other half of the wallpaper border, it says 1986 on it. And then it's got this adorable little image of a kid going upstairs. I put some stars here, and then a family circle and this really fun 80s ticking fabric with little animals on it. I put a pocket on this side. These children were riding, it was a story about riding a horse into dreamland. It was a little bit surreal, but I love the colors. She's got a little cat and her dog. And of course, this is from The Snowy Day. I could not remember for a second. I've got some chunky yarn as the tie. Here is that little cradle digital again. I put on a little tag, and then a poem about Captain Nightshirt. Clipped in here we have two little journaling cards, very similar to the ones in the other two journals. This is from a Humpty Dumpty magazine. All right, this is some vintage rickrack, and tucked in here, I just put 2 book pages that I didn't have anywhere else to put, so you're welcome to use them as you would like. They are double-sided Bedtime, so I didn't want to lose one. I didn't want to glue it down and then lose the other side, so I decided just to put this in here for anyone who would like to use them to find a way to use them. It fits like a glove. That's the first signature, and here's the second one. I've got a corner pocket with this sewing pattern kid and a giant star, little sleeping baby, and a dream card. So that's another thing I wanted to say. I forgot to say at the beginning. These journals can be childhood memory journals. They can be dream journals. If you write down your dreams, they can be baby journals. There's lots of things. Or you can just use it as a just because journal. Another vintage, this is from the 40s, a sewing pattern that was in very bad shape that I salvaged and put him on here. And this is from a Robert Louis Stevenson book. Grandmother's telling stories before bed at night with the fireplace. This is from a Golden Find Out Why book, and I put this little quote on top. Here is Dick and Jane, and we have a gingham tab and a little red and blue charm dangle. Here's some dyed notebook paper and a little quote from a book. Here's some ledger paper that I made into a pocket, and I put a dictionary definition of pajamas here. Here is the tea bag, and here is that quilted cardstock again with some 80s sewing pattern girls. Here's the other side of that flyleaf page that the other journal had of the little children and animals reading before bed. Here are some more sewing pattern kids. Handwriting paper. The blanket binding in this book is hunter green. Yellow graph paper. Here is a, I usually like to bend these little paper clips up so they won't damage the papers. A little digital, and then a to from label that match the book. This is a vintage Dennison label. This is a calendar page that I received. I don't know if it was in Happy Mail or just in a grab bag that I bought, but it's from 1990. So the font was really fun. It looks kind of like Lion King font. And it's about a little boy waking up from a dream, I think. This is a flip out with the old man poem, and it flips out here. This is some crepe paper that I ruffled, and then 2 tags an adorable sleeping child with some fabric, and then a mother and child. Another poem about, I don't know what this one's about. Mary Had a Little Lamb, maybe. This is Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. Oh, Good Night by Victor Hugo and Slumber Song. So it's about sheep, but it's also nighttime. Here is from Ira Sleeps Over, and this is a index card with a vintage sheet. One of my favorite patterns of sheet ever. Cute little image of a big bro and little bro. And then here is a vintage sheet again as a flip up, and flannel and some matching calico and a ruffle and some rickrack. Ralph Waldo Emerson quote. That's probably the quote I see most often about bedtime. Here's a side pocket with an alarm clock, and then I put a little sewing pattern kid and a little, this is like a layered journaling card. This is glued down onto this. And then here's the other half of that ledger pocket. I put this here and I clipped out the words to the song, the prayer song, I guess, and then vintage calico. Here's a vintage sewing pattern kid. His hand was cut off, so I put this teddy bear there to look like he's holding him, and I put some red gingham. And then another poem about nighttime on green. An adorable little image of a boy with his cat. This is a really fun book. It was about bunk beds, and it was very groovy looking. The mom's got these retro curlers in her hair. There they are. And then here is a fabric cluster that I put on this black quilted page. And then on the back, I put a picture of a moon. And then we have this. This is from that paperback book cover. Sewed that down. And then here's another sewing pattern girl, and this is a flip up tag. So again, if you would like the G, let me know. And this one is named Moonbeams. So all of these will be in my shop tomorrow night, Monday night, the 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed these. I hope they brought back some warm, fuzzy memories of getting ready to go to bed at night and all the things that go with that, either for yourself or your kids. You guys have a lovely day, and I'll see you soon.